My name is Stacey DeMatos, and I was diagnosed with CIDP back in 2013. Tell you a little bit about my background. I grew up in East Texas, a small town called Gladewater, where everybody knows everyone. They all know your business. Hated it when I was growing up there, but I realized as an adult now and going back and visiting that it made me who I am today. I'll probably get very emotional during this because my whole journey has been this amazing experience, and I have my best friends here to support me.
Emotional just introducing you.
I know, I do. When he said he had CIDP, I wanted to cry because it's such a rare autoimmune disease that you don't meet very many people who have it, let alone who've even heard about it.
Can you say what the initials mean?
CIDP is chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy. It's such a long name that it's just easier to say CIDP. So I started showing symptoms at the age of 42 back in May of 2012. I got this bright idea to download this app on my phone called Couch to 5K so I could start running and eventually run a 5K. And that we started that. I downloaded that app back in April of that year, and about a month later I noticed I was out running and I could not launch myself up on my tiptoes. And I thought, well, that's a little odd, but I didn't think much of it. I was on a trip in Alaska at the time and thought, how wonderful would it be to say that I went running, through the woods of Alaska. And during that same trip, I had some excruciating back pain. It wasn't just, normal aches and pains. It felt like somebody was trying to break my back in two, or my muscles were killing me. And I didn't understand what caused it or what was going on. I thought maybe I was staying at my daughter's and slept on a futon. And, as you get older, you need more comfort. So I thought maybe I had slept wrong, but I couldn't, it hurt to sit down. I couldn't get comfortable. And it's like, this just seems different. So I came back home. The back pain got better, but over time, my feet were going numb and tingly, and I got to where I couldn't really bend or wiggle my toes that much. And so I got online. Google can be your best friend or your worst enemy. I started Googling my symptoms and thought, well, maybe it's diabetes, neuropathy from diabetes. It does run in the family. So I figured I might, should go to my doctor and get it checked out, but I hate doctors. So I put it off. I procrastinated on it. And things just kept getting worse. My friends were asking me, why are you limping? And I never noticed that I was limping. It was such a small, limp that other people noticed it walking behind me, but I didn't feel it. I didn't notice it. I was like, I don't know. I've had back pain and my feet are feeling weird and I can't stand on my tiptoes anymore. Maybe I have a pinched nerve, or maybe I have diabetes because it runs in the family. But my dad, when he was about 45, 46 years old, had to have some major back surgery. And I take up after my dad a lot. So I thought, well, maybe, I inherited my dad's back and I have a slipped disc or something. So symptoms started in May. I didn't go to the doctor for the first time until September of 2012 and told my doctor my symptoms, and he ordered some blood work to check for diabetes and thyroid conditions and B12 levels, and the diabetes came back clear. I was okay. He did say that I had a low level of vitamin D and a low level of B12, and asked that I take supplements, and he had also prescribed me 10 days worth of prednisone because he thought, well, if it is a back issue, then maybe that will help with the inflammation. And it didn't help. So when I went back to let him know, he asked me to go get an MRI of my lower back. And at this time I didn't have insurance. So again, I put that off and procrastinated and decided to call I don't know what the name of the place is, but asked them if they had a cash discount, for cash paying customers. And they did. So instead of paying $1,200, I only had to pay $500, but it still took me a little bit of time to save up that money. And had the MRI done, and my doctor called me to come back and go over the MRI, and he said, "You're fine. Nothing's wrong." And I was like, "Well, what's going on?" He goes, "I don't know." He goes, "My next step would be to give you a nerve conduction test and an EMG." And I'm sure CIDP patients know what that is. The nerve conduction test is they tape little electrode things, on certain nerve points, and they zap you with electricity, and it's not very comfortable at all.
It's medieval.
It is. And the EMG is, they pretty much do the same thing to the muscles, but instead they stick needles into your muscles, and they're little ones, so the needles don't really hurt. It's the electricity that they zap you with that makes you hate life. So he said I could do that for you, but I would rather you go see a neurologist because they would want to do one of their own, and so might as well just have it done once. And I said okay, and I again procrastinated because I hate doctors and I didn't have insurance, and I know a neurologist is a specialist, so they cost a whole lot more money than just your general practitioner, and so I put it off. A friend of mine had told me about some doctors, it's called the Erosti method. I don't know if anyone's heard of it, but they do hit certain pressure points, I think, like on your feet. They use athletic tapes and do all this stuff to kind of help, like people, I think, with neuropathy or different. I'm not going to quote that or write that in stone, but I decided, let's give this a shot. I've heard people talk about it and they had great results. And so I went. It was December of 2013, and by this time I had applied for insurance, so it was going to kick in January 1st. So I went to see him, and he had that long metal tuning fork and hit his hand with it and touched the end of both of my toes, and I didn't feel a thing. And he said, "I'm not touching you. If this was just on one side, then I would work with you and see if we could, take care of this. But since it's on both sides, there's something serious going on, and you need to go see a neurologist." And I thought that my world had come to an end because I didn't want to face the truth, I guess. It's like, what is wrong with me? Is it cancer? Is it, something more serious that I might not ever be able to get rid of? So I went out to my car and sat down and I cried. And I pulled out the names of the neurologists that my doctor had referred me to and went down the list and called them and made an appointment. And even though I didn't have, my insurance hadn't kicked in, I thought, I have 2 doctors telling me to get to the neurologist and, do it now. So I decided I'm not going to wait for my insurance to kick in. I'm going to get this done. So I had called Dr. Petroff here in Austin and made an appointment, and they ran all kinds of blood tests, asked numerous questions, and, just to see, could it be lupus? Could it be Lyme's disease? Could it be MS? Could it be this? And he scheduled me to come back and do the EMG and the nerve conduction test, and went through all of that. He, after the test, he sent me back to his examination room and sat down with me, and he said, "I'm not sure what it is, but I think it could be an autoimmune disease called CIDP, but I want you to go and get a lower lumbar puncture so we can test your protein levels in your spinal fluid, because the protein levels in your blood are okay. But if it's a high protein level in your spinal fluid, then that could be a good sign that it is CIDP." And so I scheduled that to be done on New Year's Eve. And that was probably the most boring New Year's Eve I've ever had, because I did not realize after you have a spinal tap, you are not supposed to sit up. You have to lay down for a few hours, no drinking, all that. So it was a pretty mellow New Year's Eve that year. And January the 2nd of 2013, I got the phone call to come back so we can go over my test results. And I went back. These dates are burned in my brain. January the 4th, I went in for my appointment, and he said, "You have a rare autoimmune disease called CIDP." He told me what it meant. He goes, "There is no cure. It's only treatments for the rest of your life, treatments and medications. And, we can go over your treatment options. Prednisone was one, IVIG, plasmapheresis, and chemo." And when I heard the word chemo, I was like, no way. I will never in my life do chemo. he said the one with the best results and the least amount of side effects would be IVIG. So that was the one we agreed on. And for those who don't know, IVIG is just blood antibodies from plasma donors, right? Yeah, to kind of help, I guess, suppress the immune system a little bit, so your body, it just kind of slows down the attack on your nerves. And so I started that at the end of January. I had 3 treatments, 1 treatment a day for 3 days in a row. And I did the IVIG treatments for probably 6 or 7 months. Some months were better than others. Definitely, it was a nice, long little Benadryl nap every time I went. That was nice. But whenever I would go home, some treatments I would go home and I had all the energy in the world, and I would clean the house and get stuff done. And it's like, wow, this is awesome. I have energy again. But then there were other times that I would just go home and sleep the rest of the day, and didn't have energy the next day either to get through the day. So I went through that, a few treatments, and I got on Facebook and I decided to join every single CIDP group I could find on there to get more info. The day that I was diagnosed, I got on Google again to research it and read, you could end up in a wheelchair. If it moves into your respiratory system, you could die from it. And I am a very active person. I'm very social. I'm always on the go. And the idea of being in a wheelchair for the rest of my life was not an option for me. So I get on Facebook and start talking to people on these group pages. And one day, my hero, her name is Wendy Nash. She's in Florida. She had posted a comment about SCT, and I was like, I should know I feel dumb. I should know what this is. I have this disease. I should know what SCT means, but I didn't. And so I sent her a private message, and I said, what does SCT mean? And she said, it's a stem cell transplant. And I said, and you had this done? She goes, yes, it's been a year now, and I'm no longer on any treatments, no medications, and I am almost back to normal. And I said, wow. Tell me more about this. So she emailed me a link to her blog, and she emailed me a link to the doctor in Chicago who is doing this, and his name is Dr. Richard K. Burt out of Northwestern Memorial.
Can you spell it?
B-U-R-T. I will say before I go further that unfortunately right now he only does this treatment for autoimmune neuropathies or autoimmune diseases, for MS, scleroderma, CIDP, lupus. You name it. He's doing it's a trial study. You do have to meet certain requirements. Age is 18 to I believe 65 for CIDP, and you have to have failed 2 disease-modifying medications. So, anyway, I read her blog, and the word chemo was mentioned. And I told myself, I can't do this. I don't want to lose my hair. I don't want to throw up. This might be a little gross. I don't want to lose control of my bodily functions. So I put it off and put it in the back of my head for a while and sat back and thought about it. And I told my now ex-fiance that, I heard this info about a stem cell transplant in Chicago, and I'm interested in learning a little bit more about it, but chemo is involved and that scares me. So, sorry. So I sat back on this and thought about it for a few weeks, and I emailed her and I said, Wendy, if you had to do this all over again, would you do it? And she said, in a heartbeat. And so I thought, maybe chemo's not so bad after all. And I emailed Dr. Burt's office and gave him my symptoms, what I was diagnosed with, what treatments I'd been on, and they emailed me back saying, here's some forms to fill out, and we need your medical records, have those sent to us. And I printed out the forms, and at this time I was working, I left them on my desk, and I just sat there and looked at them. I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. Thank you. That was my friend Angela, who has driven here all the way from Gladewater, Texas, who is in the process of seeking out Dr. Burt's help. So Thank you for coming. So I finally decided to fill the paperwork out. I emailed my doctors to send my medical records to Dr. Burt. And next thing I know, it was probably a couple of months later, I get a phone call. I'm sitting at home on my computer, and I get a phone call, and it said Chicago, Illinois. And I was like, I can't answer that. And I didn't. And I'm going to let it go to voicemail. And I listened to the voicemail, and it was Dr. Burt's office wanting to schedule me for an evaluation. And I sat there and thought about it, and was like, Stacey, this is never going to happen if you don't pick up that phone and call them back. And I did, and this was in August of 2013, and they said, we want you to come out here for an evaluation with Dr. Burt. Can you come in October? I was like, I'll be there. I didn't know how I was going to pay for it. I didn't know how I was going to get there, but I'll be there. And a month later, I lost my job, and I wasn't able to collect unemployment, so I had absolutely no income. And I really didn't know how I was going to get there, and I put it out there on Facebook, and I had people just coming out of the woodworks. I will help you. I will pay for your flights. I will pay for every flight you need to get yourself back and forth to Chicago. And I started a GoFundMe page and to raise money to help cover other costs, along with getting some of my bills paid. And that got me through. And my fiance kept telling me, don't get your hopes up. Because what if you don't qualify? And I said, I can't hear that right now. I don't know. I have hope. I need positive thoughts and positive reinforcement here, because I have to have this happen. I don't want to have somebody take care of me for the rest of my life. It's not an option for me. And when I was sick, I've had a couple of friends here today who said, when I was sick, I never once said, why me? But I did. And I would pray to God every day, just please take my life, because I don't want to live like this. This is not me. And I went for my evaluation. Dr. Burt's nurse had said, you seem like a perfect candidate. They didn't tell me I was, in the study. You sound like a perfect candidate, and they sent me home. And a week and a half later, they called again and said, your insurance has agreed to pay for the pre-testing. We need you to come back out. So I went back out a month later and went through all kinds of pre-testing, blood work, a CAT scan, an MRI, and a heart test, lung test. You name it, I had it done. And came back home, and on December, I kept waiting and waiting and waiting for Dr. Burt's office to call me and say that, okay, you're in. It was my insurance company that called me on December 6th that year and said, we have agreed to pay for the stem cell transplant. And I cried, and I said, thank you so much. Thank you, God. This is going to be a change. Hopefully this is the cure. And over the days, reality set in, because when I went for my evaluation, Dr. Burt had said, he tells every patient this and looks them in the eye and says, nobody has ever died from this, but eventually somebody will, and you could be that person. And at that time, I didn't care, because I would rather die than live the rest of my life in this condition. I had foot drop. At the point when I went for my evaluation, my hands were curled in, and I couldn't straighten them out. I couldn't type. I had to type like this. My handwriting looked like a child's handwriting. I didn't have the strength in my hands or arms to do anything. I couldn't fix my hair anymore. I couldn't zip zippers. I couldn't button buttons. So I lived in yoga pants and t-shirts pretty much the whole time. And to zip up my boots, I had to use a clothes hanger because I didn't know they had a medical device you could zip stuff with. But so when the insurance company told me they were going to pay for it, reality set in, and I was like, okay, I could die from this, and I'm scared. I was an emotional basket case. I was on this emotional roller coaster ride the whole time. And probably about a month later, I was sitting on the couch crying. And I said, everybody says just give it to God. Just let him take care of it. And, he'll take care of you. He'll meet your needs that you need. And am not a very religious person, but I do believe in God, and I definitely to this now believe in the power of prayer, because it seemed like everything fell into my lap. And when I prayed that day and I said, God, I'm giving this to you because I can't do this, and all this worry and this fear is not going to make me better. If anything, it's going to make me worse. And I felt this weight lifted off my shoulders. And from that day forward, I never had another worry or another fear. And everything fell into my lap. It all worked out the way it was supposed to. And I flew to Chicago the beginning of February of 2014 to start the process that they call mobilization. And that's when you get checked in the hospital for overnight and go through one round of chemo. They release you the next day. 5 days later, you start taking these shots called Neupogen shots, and you give them to yourself. You inject them into your stomach or your leg, and it helps stimulate new baby stem cells to come out in mass production out of your bones. And it's this great process, but it's very, very, very painful. Not everybody experiences the pain that I did, but a lot of people do, and it felt like literally somebody had taken a baseball bat and just beat me to death. It hurt. It was worse than child labor. So for those women who have kids, you know what that means. So I did 6 days of those shots, and on the 6th day, they admitted me for just the day to have a catheter put into my jugular vein, and they harvested my stem cells, and the goal was 2 million. They harvested 5.5 million stem cells that day, and they hook you up to this apheresis machine that just separates your blood and your stem cells, and it goes. You would think 5 million stem cells would be a lot, but it wasn't. It filled up a bag like, that much. And they pulled the catheter out and sent me home. And 2 days later, I lost my hair. When it started falling out, I felt so sick to my stomach that, because for women, our hair is our identity a lot of times. I went through the day and I thought, I can't stand, every time I touch my hair, it's falling out everywhere. And I thought, I'm going to take control of this. And I shaved my head. And I had never in my life felt more empowered than I did that day. I'm taking charge of this. I'm in control. And 10 days later, I flew back out to Chicago and was admitted for a 2.5-week stay at Northwestern Memorial for the stem cell transplant. And the first 5 days for CIDP is chemo. And the first day of chemo, they gave me a different one than the first time I had went, called Rituxan, and I had a bad allergic reaction to it, and my throat was closing up, and I was having trouble breathing. I was getting hot, and I started talking like Kermit the Frog, and so they immediately unhooked me, and they said, no more of that for you. The next day, they started me on a different chemo, the one I'd had before, called Cytoxin, and I had 4 days of that, along with steroids and another drug called rabbit ATG, which is derived from rabbits, and it's supposed to help attack, I don't remember now if it's the T cells or the B cells, but so I was on that for 5 days, and they count, the days are counted as starting -5, or for CIDP it's -6 your first day that you're checked in, and they count down to 0, and day 0 is the day you get your stem cells back, and that's considered your new birthday. So March 5th of 2014 is my new birthday. I had my stem cells put back, and I had them blessed just to make sure that everything was going to be okay. And then it's a waiting period for 10 days. Some people don't have to stay the full 10 days. I did. They start counting up day 1 to day 10, and they do blood work every single day, sometimes twice a day, to check your blood levels, your white blood counts, your platelets, your red blood counts. And I had a few blood transfusions. I had some platelets also. It was a bit of a scare there for a few days after I had my stem cells put back in, because I was getting high blood pressure, and when I would lay down, I couldn't breathe. So I always had to sleep sitting up in an incline. I think now, I mean, we don't know what was causing it, but I think it could have been all the fluids that I had was putting pressure on my lungs. But it didn't go away until probably a month or two after my transplant. But I was sent home on March the 15th, and my best friend April flew up there to come take care of me. And I was probably at my weakest point at that time because the chemo had sucked the life out of me. I could hardly walk. I would step down out of a vehicle and I would just go straight to the ground because I had no strength in my legs. I could walk, but if I had to lift myself up or step down, the muscles just couldn't do it. So the whole time I was sick, I never wore my leg braces. I didn't even go get any leg braces, any AFOs. I refused to do it because I figured I'm too young for that and I'm too prideful and I would rather fall on my face. And I did quite often. But I would rather do that than wear these ugly AFOs. And after my stem cell transplant, I remember meeting some friends out on Cinco de Mayo, and I was walking through Baby A's parking lot, and I didn't have the strength to make it from my car to the front door. My legs kept getting weaker and weaker, and I fell and went straight down to my knees, and it looked like a war zone on my legs. And my primary care physician had said, Stacey, you really need to start wearing your AFOs because after everything you've been through, you don't want a hip replacement, do you? And I was like, no. So I sucked up the pride and I went to a doctor and got fitted for some AFOs and I started wearing them and I only had to wear them for 3 months. Slowly over time, whenever I got home from my stem cell transplants, I was expecting, immediate results and that didn't happen. Some people say they got it. I didn't. So I kept wondering, did this treatment even work for me? Did I waste my time? And was money wasted on this? And everyone said, just be patient, be patient. You're going to get worse before you get better. And I have no patience. And I thought, I need to, if I want to get better, I first and foremost, you have to keep that positive attitude because positive thoughts is positive results. And lots of praying. I started going to physical therapy and occupational therapy. And I remember falling while I was in physical therapy. And my physical therapist had even told me, you need to wear your leg braces. And I said, because I don't want to be sued because you fell and hurt yourself. So I started wearing them. I guess it was 3 or 4 months after my stem cell transplant, I returned to work. That was in July of 2014. And in August 1st of 2014, I had went to Dallas for a convention that for this business I'm involved in. And again, I was too prideful to wear the leg braces, so I took them off. I brought them with me just in case, but I took them off, and I haven't worn those again since that day. I never needed them again. Slowly over time, it was September of 2014, I got on my bicycle. I'm like, let me see if I can do this. People with CIDP know, and I'm sure, I guess neuropathy, I don't think it's just a disease specific. You have very little balance, So before I couldn't lift my leg up over my bike without falling over because I didn't have balance. But I got on my bicycle and I rode that day. Not far, but I was able to get on my bike and ride. And my fingers started coming back. And you can see now I can straighten them out. I can type. I can, back to normal. No neuropathy left. And in October, beginning of October 2014, I went for my 6-month evaluation. Had another nerve conduction test in the EMG, and the neurologist there had said, well, I can see some improvement, but not a lot. And he goes, how do you feel? And I said, I feel like $1 million. And he goes, well, that's what's most important, is how you feel. And so I said, next time, or hopefully within the next month or two, you guys will get a video of me running. And they said, well, we'll be looking forward to it. And about 2 weeks after I got home from that Chicago trip, my granddaughter was at the house. She was 2, and she went running down the driveway, and I went running after her, not even realizing at that point that I was running. And I grabbed her and I said, oh my gosh, I just ran. I am able to run again. This is awesome. So I went and got my fiance and I said, hey, I want you to come out here and videotape me running. I got to send this to Dr. Burt. And slowly over time, this little thing started coming back. My balance was back to normal before anything else. My foot drop went away, and my hands got back to normal. I have more energy now than I ever have before I ever even got sick. And the only issues I still deal with are neuropathy in my feet. I still can't really bend or wiggle my toes. There's numbness and tingling, but there's no weakness. I can live a normal life. I'm climbing stairs, and I can do inclines. I just got back from a trip from Oregon and went to the sand dunes, and I looked at this big old huge mountain or hill of sand that I thought 2 years ago I would have saw the sand and turned around and walked away. And I conquered that hill. I walked up with no balance issues, no problems, none whatsoever. And so kind of back up a little bit, how I found out about this group. Whenever I was diagnosed, I, of course, was on Google to search for CIDP support groups, and Hands, Heart, and Feet popped up. And I had read about Peter and Marjorie's daughter, and I thought, I need to go see them sometime, which I never did. I don't think at that point I was ready. I don't think I was ready to accept what I had been diagnosed with. But after my stem cell transplant in this past March, at my 1 year point, I got back on my bike on a regular basis and would ride about 12 miles a day, 3 or 4 days a week. And my big mouth, I was on Facebook bragging about it. And, over this whole journey, I've met so many friends now. I call them friends. I've never met most of them who have MS or scleroderma, or all these other autoimmune disease, and we have become one big family. But I posted on there, I rode my bike 12 miles today, and some girl in San Antonio who has MS said, hey, would you want to do the bike MS ride? And I said, when is it? And she said, October 3rd and 4th. And I said, sure, I'll do it. I didn't realize what I was getting myself into. She sent me the link, and I went to sign up, and it was a 100-mile bike ride. Now, I didn't ride 100 miles, but I signed up for it, and I was scared. I'm like, what did I just get myself into? I don't know that I can do this. I almost thought about backing out of it. And I went for an orientation, and they said, oh, no, you can stop at any point. It's a 2-day ride. You don't have to ride the whole thing. They have shuttle vans that will come and pick you up at any point. And I was like, oh, so we can cheat? And they're like, we encourage it. It's about raising money and getting together, raising awareness. And I said, okay. And I got online and I found Nancy's contact info. I found out that Hands, Heart, and Feet had changed their name. And I emailed Nancy. And it might not have been the nicest email, but hopefully it wasn't too ugly. But I said, I know that your son has CIDP and that you started this group, support group, and, to raise awareness. Why do we not have any walks or runs or, those type of fundraisers for CIDP? I said, I have to go and sign up to do a bike ride for MS and to raise awareness for them when I think it should be for CIDP. And she emailed me back and she goes, I'm so glad you reached out to me. Let's get together and talk. And I was like, uh-oh, okay. And I met her, and I love Nancy. She is such a sweetheart. And Rick, did you meet up with us that first day? Okay, Rick was there. And he, of course, he told you guys, but tells me all the time, you inspire me, you're my hero. And it makes me feel good to be able to talk about this and share this. So over time, I have gotten a little closer with Nancy, and not as close as I'd like to be, but I live in San Marcos and I work, and she's busy with her stuff. But that's kind of how I got involved and introduced to the Neuropathy Alliance of Texas. And her and Rick had asked me, do you mind sharing your story? And I said, I would love to, because I love talking about this. I'm very passionate about spreading the word for what they call HSCT, hematopoietic stem cell transplant. using your own stem cells, unless you have Crohn's disease, then you have to have a donor. I don't know why. But, and I like to spread the word. You don't realize who is going to be affected by your story. Hate to front you out again, Angela. But I did not, me and Angela went to the same high school together, but she was a few years younger than me, so we didn't know each other in high school, but I knew her sisters, but we were friends on Facebook. And I get on Facebook, I put my life out there as far as my disease is concerned. It's 2 years later, I guess it was, she had reached out to me and she said, hey, I've been following your story and your journey and I want to know more about it. And this is what's wrong with me. And I hope you don't mind me asking questions and I hope I'm not overstepping boundaries. And I wrote her back and I said, I will tell you anything you want to know, because if you tell 5 million people and it helps one, then you've done your job. And so I just ask that if you know anybody with MS or CIDP or scleroderma or lupus or any autoimmune disease, I will give you my name, phone number, my Facebook page, my email, everything. Get them in contact with me. Or all they have to do is Google Dr. Burt in Chicago, Illinois, stem cell transplant, and his web pages will come up. This whole journey, this whole process has given me hope, more hope than I already had. That's what got me through it. And a happier outlook on life. Nothing gets me down anymore. I don't care how bad things may get. I'm like, I got through my stem cell transplant and CIDP. I can get through anything. So it's a positive attitude. And, that's all I can say. So thank you for having me here. Anyway.
I'm sure there's some questions. Anybody, please.
When they removed your stem cells, because it's an autoimmune disease, I would think that there's a danger that they could just give you back the same.
Well, that's what
What did they do to
that's what the Nubigen shots are for, to stimulate new baby stem cells that have no memory. And so all those little baby stem cells come out, and then they harvest those before they can mature and have that memory of the disease. They do treat them somehow. I don't know with what. They freeze them and treat them with something. I'm not a doctor, so I didn't ask. But I don't think they treat it with anything that's going to erase any kind of a memory. But it's because they're little baby stem cells. And so they have no memory of your disease. The stem cell transplant is pretty much just rebooting your immune system. And honestly, it's the chemo that did the job. It halted the disease. The stem cells just helped your immune system build up quicker. But you could do it without the stem cells. I just wouldn't recommend it, really, because of the amount of chemo that you get. It shuts that immune system down, not completely, but almost.
You'd be in danger of getting infection.
Yes. Yeah.
Did they give you antibiotics or anything?
They did. They prescribed me some medications, fluconazole, acyclovir, and I don't know what else. I believe it was a cyclovir I was supposed to be on for a year, and the fluconazole I was supposed to be on for 6 months, and I stopped all medications after 3 months, and I do not recommend that for anybody. I did okay with it, but I don't like popping pills. I don't like medications. I'd rather wing it, and that's probably dangerous. I don't recommend that, because who was to say that I wouldn't have gotten some kind of an infection that I couldn't fight because I didn't take my medication. But I haven't been sick a day since, and I am not on any medications and no more treatments, and I am living life normal again.
Great.
You said you had that you can't move your toes and you have some numbness. Do you have pain?
No, the nerve pain is gone.
So you had nerve pain before?
Oh, felt like somebody was stabbing my big toe with an ice pick or something.
Okay.
A lot of pain, yes, and no more pain. So I can deal with the numbness and the tingling if that's the worst of what I'm going to have.
How about that, the IVIG treatment? Does that help?
Okay, so I was supposed to talk about that. The IVIG treatment, it helped me get a little bit more energy, maybe a little bit more strength, but I could tell that I was still getting worse on it. My hands were still, getting worse. I guess it was, Huh?
Mandatory.
The IVIG? Yeah, that was my choice. Yeah. I started the IVIG January 2013, and come May, I noticed that numbness and tingling in my fingertips, and my hands were getting weak, and I noticed my handwriting was changing, and I was like, okay, I can climb stairs okay. So my legs were getting a little stronger, but my hands were getting worse. To the point it felt like when I washed my hair, it felt like I was rubbing my hands on sandpaper. You know, walking barefoot, I'm sure you guys know, feels like you're walking on cat litter or something.
Pea gravel.
Yeah, yeah. Every little tiny thing hurt. So I could not walk through my house without socks or house shoes. You know, now I can walk barefoot, no problem. Still isn't the most comfortable thing, but it's not painful.
That's an
So
anomaly of this whole thing is that your feet are numb, but yet it's painful to walk on things. other
Yeah,
than
certain-
salt
yeah.
and carpet or something.
so
I never did understand that.
yeah, I don't have the pain as far as when I step on something now, because I stepped on a piece of cat food the other day, and normally that would have shot me through the ceiling. Like, oh, that, you know, but I stepped on it, and it's like, you know, it didn't
Yeah.
hurt.
Yeah.
And I just brushed it off and, you know, went about my business. I was like, okay, go ahead.
I don't seem to be getting worse, but nobody knows why I have neuropathy. How do you diagnose CIDP?
They diagnosed me by doing the nerve conduction test, and then and the EMG, and then the spinal tap was what signified, or, you know, solidified the fact that I had it.
I had all that plus the nerve biopsy. They look at the nerve somehow. You didn't have a biopsy,
No, no.
but I had the spinal tap and
Did you have CIDP?
I do have it, yeah. And I'm wearing those things she keeps talking about, AFL. Ankle foot orthotic is what it is. I've got 2 of them on.
Yeah, when I wore
And I
mine,
wear long pants all the time because
well,
I'm
see,
tired of little kids going, what is that?
well, when I wore mine, it was in the middle of summer, and I wore them with shorts.
Yeah,
Because by that time, I was like, you know what? I have no more pride. I just need to let it go and, you know, get better. And I'm glad that I did, because I think the AFOs helped with that foot drop, helped kind of correct it as my nerves were healing.
Well, yeah. My foot's locked in a 90-degree. The AFO goes all the way up to the front of my foot, and so I can't bend my foot at all because the AFO holds it in place.
Yeah,
Well, it keeps you from tripping, so,
yeah.
but you walk kind of flat-footed.
With the neuropathy going on, as you guys would step and you feel the pain, do they get as though through that, you almost feel like you have phantom feet and hands, but they're actually there?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it does. And feels like you have,
Somebody come get something blowed off or cut off in the war, you have that phantom feeling of losing your limb.
Right,
They're not, I haven't lost them, but,
but you can't feel them.
or sometimes it would feel like there was a very, very, very tight ace bandage or sock or something on your
Yes.
feet. And I still have that feeling, and I don't know if anybody else does this, but I will hit my foot on the floor because that somehow helps those nerves kind of like wake up.
Wake 'em up.
Yeah, a little bit, you know. Even before my stem cell transplant, when my feet would hurt when I had the nerve pain, I would sit there and hit my feet on the floor, and my fiance would be like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Don't ask. It just makes them feel better. I don't know how or why, but it does." Because if they just sat still, it just had that tight feeling and that nerve pain, and, you know, it's like you want to move your feet, but you can't. You know, I mean, I couldn't lift my foot up. The only thing I could do is press down, but I couldn't lift it up, and couldn't move my toes. My toes were just in one spot. I couldn't do anything with them, and now I can kind of bend them just a little bit, but I still can't wiggle them. But
How about, do you have a cramp?
do I what?
Cramps?
You know what? I do. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I've forgotten about that. I do sometimes still get cramps in my calves, and it's not a Charlie horse cramp either. It's different. And there are moments when, especially if I've been doing a lot of riding, the muscles or something in my hands will kind of seize up. Yeah, cramp up, and I have to, and I'll pull it out, and if I let go, you can see sometimes my thumb will just go right back down on its own, and it shoots up my arm. I asked Dr. Burt what causes that, and he said, "Oh, it could be your nerves regenerating." But I mean, what about people whose nerves aren't
don't-
regenerating?
they
They can
don't
still
know.
have that happen. So I don't understand it.
So Stacey,
But
about
oh.
cramps, I remember a long time ago seeing on a tennis court, somebody, a professional, was having cramps and they took it to it, and they said you should stretch slowly, stretch the offending muscle. I'll never forget those words. Is that always the treatment? Is that,
That
because this is a common thing.
that's what I do because that's what I've always heard too. When you get a Charlie horse or something, yeah,
Because you're on weight, you can slowly, you can
Yes.
monitor how, okay.
It's
Yeah.
hard to do with the hand though.
yeah, you can't do.
Right, that's, yeah, you're
It's
amazing.
easier to
I gotta
do.
tell you, this is a great story for you to share.
Thank you.